Hello everyone and welcome back to Monsters of the Mind. As always, I'm your host Mr.G. So, lions. You know, the big cats, live in Africa, stuff like that. Yeah, those guys. Lions are a very notable figure because they appear in a lot of European mythology, and it's pretty clear that they demanded some sort of respect, and possibly fear. And today we're talking about two lions that were, to be honest, kind of freaks of nature. So let's get into them. Today we're talking about the Chimera and the Manticore. Chimera means she-goat, and there was only one of them. She was pretty malevolent, and she lived in the city of Lycia, which is nowadays in Turkey, and she comes from Greek mythology. Appearance-wise, the Chimera was a lion that had a goat head growing out of its side, and its tail was a viper, or in some stories a dragon. It could also breathe fire, which is a detail that will become important later. The Chimera is one of the many spawn of Typhon and Echidna, and she is the sister to the previously talked about Cerberus. Unlike Cerberus, though, who is a pretty reoccurring character, the Chimera only really has one myth to her name. In the story of Bellerophon, the titular hero is sent on quest by King Lobades in hopes that it'll kill him. One of these quests was to slay the Chimera. So, riding on the winged horse Pegasus, Bellerophon threw into the city of Lycia, where the Chimera was wreaking havoc. Bellerophon ended up killing the beast after he jammed a block of lead into her mouth, at which point she breathed fire, which melted the lead, blocking air from entering the Chimera's mouth, suffocating her to death. Because I guess the goat and snake head aren't connected to her respiratory system or something. Meanwhile, the Manticore means man-eater, and it was also an individual. It was also pretty malevolent, and reports say that it lived in India. It comes from Persian mythology. Appearance-wise, the Manticore is described as having the body of a lion with a human head, and either a scorpion tail or a tail full of spikes, depending on who's telling the story. Interestingly enough, I couldn't actually find any stories that included the Manticore. No origin stories, and no stories about how it got slayed. Everything I could find about it was basically either a warning or a description of the beast, so it was more like a folk monster, kind of like Bigfoot in a way. But from these warnings, we can gather that the Manticore was extremely ferocious and attacked on sight. It apparently lived in India, and it could shoot its spikes, which, as an aside, makes me lean towards the tail covered in spikes thing, since I have a very hard time picturing a scorpion tail firing its spike. But that's just a me thing. Anyway, the only animal immune to its venom were elephants, and that it left no traces of its prey, indicating that it ate everything, down to the bone. And now here's Vincent talking about his experience with these monsters. Imagine you staple together 3 bratty teenage girls onto one body. That's basically the Chimera. Of all of Echidna's children, she's the second worst in my opinion. One thing these myths never talk about is the fact that Chimera has an incredibly high-pitched, whiny voice. She is the definition of a brat. She is always demanding everything, and since she has 3 heads, the other 2 are always argue about what it is they want in the first place. And that goat head, especially, it seems like she's a contradictorian or whatever they're called. Because every time one of the other 2 heads wants something, she's always like, nope, I don't want that, change your mind. And it is honestly kind of annoying. I cannot stand being around her. As for the Manticore, I've never actually gotten a very good look at him. I've seen him from the distance a few times, but he kind of gives me the creeps. That whole human-ish appearance is very uncanny, and it keeps me away from him. Honestly, I kind of get nauseous looking at him, because he does not look right. Alright, now let's look at the 2 cards. Chimera's pretty good. Can't really think of anything bad here. I like how the goat and viper head are screaming at each other like they're arguing about something. That's just... I'm sorry, it's just... I'm sorry, it's just funny, and I can't unsee it ever since I came to that conclusion. What I'm wondering, though, is what kind of snake is that? Are there any herpetologists watching this who can identify the snake? Because I would like to know. It looks like some sort of rattlesnake, but those don't live in Europe, so I'm drawing a blank here. Anyway, this card just gives some basic details and tells about how it was killed by Bellerophon, except here it claims that it died of lead poisoning and not suffocation, which, if you ask me, would actually make a lot more sense, but unfortunately that's not how the myth goes. So unfortunately, I have to deduct a point for that, and this card gets a 9 out of 10. As for the Manticore, yeesh, that thing's ugly. And again, the Manticore was described as being ugly. So, I don't know. Here, they kind of compromised with the tail situation, in that they gave it a scorpion-esque tail, but they covered it in a bunch of spikes at the end, making it have a mace ball of tails. And just look at the smile on the back of the car. That is... I do not like that. Not one bit. Can't really think of anything wrong here that I could deduct a point for. This is pretty mythologically sound. So, Manticore gets our series' first 10 out of 10, but that's a very reluctant one, and a very cautious one. Now let's look at these two cats in pop culture. Both of these animals appeared in Dungeons & Dragons. Both of them were also in the God of War series. And both monsters were in My Little Pony. You know, I swear when I was making this series, I did not think My Little Pony would be one of the reoccurring series I would have to bring up appearances in. I swear, I did not think that would be a thing I would have to do. As for solo appearances, the Manticore has appeared as a boss in the video game Ark Survival Evolved, and yes, even though we switched topics, I still have to bring up this game. Because why not? Manticores have also appeared in Castlevania. One of the main characters of Pixar's Onward is a Manticore. And the Chimera appears in an episode of the cartoon based off Disney's Hercules. That's all for this episode of Monsters of the Mind. Next time, be on the lookout for the full moon, because it just might change you. Get the hint? Bye!